Good morning, church. How are you doing? Everybody's doing good? Wow, that's good. Who noticed it was cold? I did. I would ask whose car didn't start, but they're not here today. Welcome, those of you watching from home. Jumper cables are a thing. You should buy some. We have new people here today. I just want to welcome you. I want to tell you we are just a bunch of people here who are just trying to learn who Jesus is. Trying to steep in the truth of who Jesus is. You are welcome here. You are in a great place. I'm glad that you are here. My name is Peter. I'm one of the pastors here, and I get the opportunity and the excitement this morning to not only preach out of the book of Ezekiel, but to start a brand new series in the book of Ezekiel called, go for it, Peter, put her up there, Ezekiel, not easy. Easy. I thought it was funny. I'm also dyslexic, so the fewer letters possible, I'm telling you, it makes a big difference. I was talking with someone today about cursive writing. If you want to play a dirty trick on about a quarter of the population, use cursive writing. Those of us who are dyslexic, you connected all the letters together. That's not fair. So I like it when we spell out things on stage. That makes it easier for someone like me. But anyway, that's not part of the sermon. That's just me telling you. We're starting in this book, and Ezekiel is a challenging book to read. It's a challenging book to preach from. If I asked for you to call out your favorite book of the Bible, very seldom would people say Ezekiel, but I would say Ezekiel. It's one of my favorite books, and the reason behind it being my favorite is because of how descriptive it is. How many of you can get lost in a story? Just raise your hand if you can get lost. A good book, a movie, something like that. If you are a country music fan, you can get lost in a story. That's about all country music is. It's some snippet of a story put to music. How many of you are even upset I even said country music? Go ahead, put up your hand. I recognize you too. That's over in this section. It's a difficult book to read. It's a difficult book to understand. And we have been trying to understand it since the beginning, since Ezekiel wrote it. But here's one of the things, there's a few things you need to know about the book in order to understand it. One of the most important things is to know that it was written over a very long period of time. This was not a person sitting down to pen something to send off. Maybe it took a month, maybe it took a year. That's not this book. This book took a lifetime to write. And so because of that, there are three distinct voices in the book. Let me explain it this way. You would not give a child a knife because you know that knife is not going to, it's not going to bless that child. They'll probably cut themselves. They'll probably harm themselves. It wouldn't be wise to do that. So if you wrote it down, you would say, do not give a knife to a child. Then that child grows up a little bit, and you say, now we are going to give a knife to a child. They must learn how to use the knife, to use it safely. It is an important tool. If you are going to cook, you must learn how to use a knife. If you wait a little bit longer and that person grows up, now you anticipate that they are wise enough to then teach someone else how to use a knife. But if you only look at one of those things, you might think, well, this is a person that says never use a knife. Knives are bad. Or you might look at a person, at a writing of someone and say, this is a person that thinks we have to learn how to use knives, but that's a forever thing. And you might look at it a little bit later on and say, this is a person who is a teacher and teaches people to use knives. But in order to get the full picture, you have to read the full article. Ezekiel has three separate voices. Voice number one comes from a guy who was a priest, and 5 years later, he becomes a prophet. He becomes someone who has been exiled. He was a priest, but the Babylonians came in and they took over his world. And they kicked him out. He is not free to return home. The people who he loves are still there, but the Babylonians have taken all of the government power, all of the political power, all of the church leadership, all of the prominent business people, all of the employers, and scattered them away. Then they've gone and they have torn down the temple. And so their message is clear. You may worship any god you like, provided it is Babylon. And Ezekiel stands outside of this. And he knows the truth, but he is far away from being able to teach it. It's helpful to understand that this was before we had photocopiers, so people didn't have the Bible. They counted on the leaders of the church to read them what we would call the scriptures, the Old Testament, the Torah. And all of that is gone. And it doesn't take long for people to forget, does it? How many of you could not write in cursive even if you tried? Go ahead, be honest. Come on. Just me, huh? Pat, where are you? There you go. Doesn't take long for us to learn, for us to forget things. That's the first thing. These are difficult times, and he is watching as a cruel, exceptionally cruel group of people are coming to take over. That's the first voice. The second voice is a little bit later when that exceptionally cruel group of people has come, has taken over. It's even worse than they imagined. That's the second voice in the book of Ezekiel, and he writes from that voice. And then the third voice is this. He can see an end to the troubles coming. He can see something good is coming. He can see an end to the Babylonian rule. It's not here yet, but he knows that it's coming. It's sort of like when you are waiting for spring, and it's not here yet, but you know that it's coming. And you write from hope. You write in anticipation of green things poking through the snow. But it's not here yet. We also need to read this book with an ability that the original readers didn't have. And it is that we can read this book through the lenses of people who know the name Jesus Christ. They know the story of Jesus' birth. They know the story of Jesus' death and resurrection. They know the story of the answer to the promises that the people of the Old Testament were waiting for. This coming Messiah from the line of David. Waiting for this, unsure of what it looks like, or at least what they anticipated it would look like, isn't necessarily how it panned out. But we can look back at this and we can read the book of Ezekiel, and we can also read the New Testament, and that the book of Ezekiel informs what we read in the New Testament. We read about the promises in Ezekiel, we read about the visions in Ezekiel, we read about the prophecy in Ezekiel, and then we see it unfold in the life of Jesus. But Ezekiel had not met Jesus. Jesus was not yet born. And so we are able to read this in a different point of view, and it changes how we read it. I'm going to come to that a little bit later. This is a complex book because of the visions in it. This is also some of the things that push people away. Even in the first chapter, and I want to encourage you, you've got a week to do this. I want you to go home and open your Bible to the book of Ezekiel, which if you don't have a Bible, go ahead and take one of the ones in the seat backs in front of you. That's our gift to you. You just take that home. That's yours. and open it to page 575 and read the first 3 chapters. The first chapter is an incredible vision. It's a vision that we have been trying to turn into artwork ever since. In fact, if you go on Google and you type in Ezekiel's vision, you will find page after page after page of things that look very similar to each other. You'll have a picture of an entity up high, and that entity has different faces on it, and there's clouds around that. And you'll have a picture, the same picture of a guy sitting at the bottom, and he's looking up at it. You'll see a picture of a giant steel wheel or metal wheel, and in that is another wheel, and in that is another wheel, and in that is another wheel, and all these wheels are spinning all at the same time, yet the wheel's not going anywhere. You'll see drawings of these strong people, but at their feet there are hooves. You'll see a storm. You'll see birds with wings and all of this stuff covered in intense light. And we've been trying to describe it and put it into artwork. If you're artsy, get out your pencils. Read the first chapter and try to draw it. Try to understand it. And what we will come to find out is that this is a vision, Ezekiel says, of the Lord, of unbelievable power, unparalleled power, of a God that is not afraid, of a God that is not thwarted by what happens on earth, is not thwarted by governments, not thwarted by storms, not thwarted by anything, quite above that, quite more powerful than that. And Ezekiel tries to put that into words and put that into images. For me, it captures me. For me, I try to imagine that and I get caught up in that. I try to make sense of it. You might be like that. There are prophecies in the scriptures. Every once in a while, someone will wander into the church and they will say, I am a prophet and I need to preach on Sunday. I already know you're not a prophet, just so you know. And I ask them about the book of Ezekiel, and almost always they haven't read it. Well, the book of Ezekiel is about a prophet, and wait till we go through this. There are long periods of silence. I am interested that a prophet never comes and says, I want to come and be silent. That doesn't happen. We do have an opening for that. If you'd like to come and be silent, we can fit that in. But if you want to come and you want to spout off, no. But you can read the book of Ezekiel. And once you're all done that book, let me know if you want to be a prophet. There's a few points I'll bring out in this. And it was funny last week when Larry was talking about some of the stuff coming up in Ezekiel. Are you sure you want to be a prophet? Are you sure you're excited about that? Just wait, this is the teaser. I'm not telling you what's coming, but if you read ahead, it's coming. And it's not likely something you want to be part of. And some of this book is just weird. It's hard to understand, it's visual, all this sort of stuff. And some of it we're going to read, and at the end of it we're going to go, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I just don't get it. And yet it's all there. We need to be aware of the historical circumstances that are happening. We need to be aware of why it was written, of what it was trying to communicate. It matters. We actually know when it was written. In the very first verse, chapter 1, on July 31st of my 30th year, when I was when I was a Judean exile beside the Kebar River in Babylon. We know when it was. We know where it was. He's very clear with how long things take. He's very clear on how long he's been part of this and how long this has been happening in the circumstances around him. And some of the time, he's calling out to God, saying, "Do you hear?" And sometimes he's hearing back from God. He's saying, "You do hear." And sometimes God is feeding him, nourishing him spiritually in a way that we beg for. This is an amazing book. There is lots in this book, and I'm excited about journeying through this together. I'm going to start reading chapter 2. I want you to go home and read chapter 1. It's a vision, and that vision informs chapter 2. This is chapter 2. "Stand up, Son of Man," said the voice. "I want to speak with you." The Spirit came into me as he spoke, and he set me on my feet. I listened carefully to his words. "Son of man," he said, "I am sending you to the nation of Israel, a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been rebelling against me to this very day. They are stubborn and hard-hearted people, but I am sending you to say to them, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says.' And whether they listen or refuse to listen, for remember, they are rebels, at least they will know they have a prophet among them." This is one of the points that might resonate with you. If you have a loved one who just won't hear, who's been told the truth but they won't listen. Or perhaps it's you. You've sat in church for countless Sundays. You've heard countless sermons, but you've never heard a sermon. You don't tune in. You won't tune in, particularly when someone tells you to tune in. No, don't tell me what to do. I was talking with the staff this week. I was talking about the very first time I ever paid attention in Sunday school, ever. They were teaching in the book of Revelations. They had been teaching for quite a while. I hadn't been listening. I hadn't read the book of Revelations. I didn't know what it was about, and they began to talk about this church in the book of Revelations. I would later learn that there was more than one, but I didn't know that. I thought they were talking about the church down the road, and it made no sense to me at all. I had sat in Sunday school since always, and I hadn't paid attention, and a year and a half later, I was at Bible school. It took me a long time to tune in. Deeply rebellious. That's my story. Deeply rebellious. Don't tell me what to do. Might be your story. Might be a loved one's story. Remember, they are rebels. At least they will know they have had a prophet among them. Son of man, do not fear them or their words. This is one of these things that comes up through the Old Testament and the New Testament over and over and over again when we are dealing with God. Do not be afraid. Almost like it's our choice. Almost like we worship God and not our emotions. Do not be afraid. Even though sending you to a rebellious people, even though there's all this stuff in the world that's going on that is really harmful, genuinely harmful. Even though people in this story are actually dying, even though the church is literally being turned into rubble, even though all of that is happening, don't be afraid, because remember the image of God that has existed in chapter 1. Not worried about what's happening. Not threatened by what's happening. Not in danger of being snuffed out like a candle by what is happening. Instead, very much in control on a different level than what is happening. Not afraid. And the instruction is, do not be afraid. Don't fear them or their words. Don't be afraid, even though their threats surround you like nettles and briars and stinging scorpions. Do not be dismayed by their dark scowls, Even though they are rebels, you must give them my message. Whether they listen or not, but they won't listen, for they are completely rebellious. Son of man, listen to what I say to you. Do not join in their rebellion. Keep your eyes on me, not them. Keep your focus on me, not them. And then he says this, and here's where we're going to hover today. Here's what it says. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Then I looked and saw a hand reaching out to me. It held a scroll, which he unrolled. And I saw that both sides were covered with funeral songs, words of sorrow, and pronouncements of doom. One of the challenges that we face is people's belief that if you interact with God, you must deny that hard stuff is happening in your life. You must smile and be cheerful and sing happy birthday, everyone, even though your heart is bleeding. Even though your very world has just come apart. Even though the things that you care about the most are crumbling in front of you, yet when we talk with God, we gotta smile. That is not what the scriptures say. Those are lies put in place to push people away from Christ. Let me read to you what the scriptures say. And I saw that both sides were covered with funeral songs, words of sorrow, and pronouncement of doom. This is what is going on in Ezekiel's life. The bad guys are coming. Their name is Babylon. And they're going to kill it all. And they're going to tear him away from his family, from those he loves, from the land he knows, and they are going to scatter them far. Literally, it is like us getting pulled from here and sent into the deep tundra in way northern Saskatchewan. Even if there's beauty to it, it's not my home. And I don't want to be there. I want to be back home, and I want to be back home when back home still feels like back home. But even if I went back home, it's all gone, it's all different. I can't go to church anymore because it's gone. I can't go to my favorite coffee shop anymore because it's not a coffee shop anymore. I can't walk up to someone and say, praise Jesus, because we don't worship that God anymore. I can't go home because home is gone. That is sorrow. There's a death in that. And when there's a death, we have a funeral, and at funerals we sing funeral songs. And God says, I know. Here are the scrolls. Here's what's written on them. Eat this. Make this part of you. Consume it. Know it. It's scrumptious. Eat it. And the voice said to me, Son of man, eat what I am giving you. Eat this scroll. Then go and give its message to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he fed me the scroll that has lament, the scroll that has heartache, the scroll that has the story of the existence that Ezekiel knows. Fill your stomach with this, he said. And when I ate it, it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. Oh yes, this is what I need. This is right. This tastes good to me. I don't want to sing happy birthday. I don't want to sing songs where everyone's happy and clappy. I want my guts to be poured out in front of God and have him understand what's going on. And God's response is, fine, put this in your guts. So that when it spills out, it is what I gave you. It does not take long right now, if you are watching the news anywhere in the globe, it does not take long to find fear. It does not take long to find sorrow. We have had our fill of death and then some. It does not take long to find people clamoring for an answer. People screaming, "Stop! Stop this!" It doesn't take long for us to grow weary of our existence. Some of you have had a very hard year. You feel like 2025 has been 2 years long already, and it's mid-February. Some of you have had loss. Some of you have been reminded of old loss. And if one more person tells you to sing happy birthday, you'll just turn around and leave. I want to challenge you. Consume this. Sit down. Read it. Do not expect an angry God who's coming to smite you, to smack you with his shepherd hook, just looking for you, and whack, gotcha. Whack, gotcha. That God you will not find. But here is what you will find. A God without fear, looking to nourish you, who understands what you're going through. He knows. But he actually knows. And he actually knows you. He knows your name. He knows your middle name. He knows the reason behind your name. He knows why he made you the way he made you. He knows what is to come. He knows what is behind. He knows the answer to the stories that we look at God and we say, what is going to happen? And he is not afraid. And he will feed us. And he will feed us what is appropriate to us. And he'll feed me what is appropriate to you. And he will feed you what is appropriate to me. This is the loving God. How countercultural is this? In a culture that says we have got to start looking out for ourselves, which is a hilarious comment, by the way. As if since the beginning of time, all we've done is look out for everyone else, and that didn't pan out. It's just a stupid saying. Instead, what God feeds us, he says, consume this. Eat this book. Eat this. Make this part of you. There's something that's happening right now, and there was a technical term for it, and I didn't write it down because for sure I wasn't going to forget it. And I've forgotten it. But it means you have scrolling doom. It's called doom scroll. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. It means you have consumed something, all right? And it's doom. It's not hard to find. It makes you scroll to the next one. It says the waters are coming. They're bad. It's a psychological thing. We see this. Psychologists are commenting, they see this all the time. They're even talking about how it spiked in 2008 when we got smartphones. You'll have to double check that. That's what I read on my smartphone. But before that, phones did calling things. And like, that's the one thing I don't do on my phone is like when my phone rings, it's like, I don't do that. But I scroll and I find out what's going on. What's going on in this world. And by the way, in our world, very similar to what's going on with Ezekiel here, we are told who to hate. currently, the people we are to hate are the Americans. Can you think of something more counter-Christian than that? Stop it. Stop it. And for my friends and my sister and my brother who are Americans, you are safe here. We love you. You have a beautiful country. You, like us, are under tension. We are together in that. We have to stop hating the children of God. We have to stop that right now. You're welcome here. Welcome here. My sister and my brother, they're both in-laws, they live in Cincinnati. Beautiful place. Beautiful place. Please don't hate them. Eat this book. Understand, God knows what's going on in your life. God knows better than you. God loves you. And when we tell this to people, even if they are rebellious, it is not making God fearful. It is not thwarting his power. There is no threat of God disappearing or his church disappearing, even if the buildings burn to the ground. You know what the difference between a church and a restaurant is? I'm going to pick on one. You know what the difference between church and a Subway is? If airplanes fly over the top of both buildings and drop bombs and they turn both buildings into rubble, nobody goes to the hole that used to be a Subway. The sandwiches are gone. But we will meet in the crater that used to house this building. We will worship God. We'll worship God here together. Bring your coats. It's cold out. It's different. It is not dependent on the building. I don't know if you know the end of this story in Ezekiel, but the temple that had been torn to the ground, it got rebuilt. We can do that. Los Angeles is currently rebuilding a lot of ground. They're about to start. I hope they are starting. We can do that. It doesn't thwart God. There is no law that can be passed that makes God forget about you or your reality. There is no law that can be passed that scares God. The church is not shrinking and losing power because she is his bride. He's coming for her. It's a promise. He gets his way. So don't be afraid. Instead, eat this book. I'm going to invite the worship team to come back to the front. We're going to sing together. We're going to sing. You can sing in your fear. You can sing in your dread. You can sing in your sorrow. You can sing in your joy. But let's sing. So some of you might be willing to try and unsure where to start. Go to the book. Read the first chapter. I promise you won't get it. If you do get it, come tell me. I have some questions. Read. Get your pencils. Try to draw it. You're not going to be wrong. I'd love to see what you come up with. Just start. Journey with us. Read the first 3 chapters, Ezekiel, chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. If you're not familiar with the Bible, the chapters are a couple of paragraphs. It's not pages and pages. I'm a slow reader. I'm dyslexic. I can get through it in about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll bet you could do it in 5 or 6. But don't rush through dinner. Chew your food. You'll get indigestion if you don't. Read it. Read it again. Do not be afraid when you come with questions. I promise you, so will I. There's a blessing in the beginning of the Bible, in the book of Numbers, and it's something my wife and I have prayed over our children every night of their lives. Sometimes, like teenagers, come home way late, so we pray it and hope God's extension cord is long enough to get them. Book of Numbers, I would like to pray this over you, and so if you are willing, I invite you to close your eyes and hold out your hands like I'm giving you a present. And I'm going to read this over top. And when I am done reading this, you are welcome to continue on with your day. Go to lunch and eat this book. Let me pray and read this over you. Numbers chapter 6, starting in verse 22. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons to bless the people of Israel with this special blessing. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you peace." There's more. Come back next week. There's more. We'll see you then.